the reason that we are talking about this issue, governance and management, is to discuss how to ensure the healthy, robust growth of microfinance institutions or institutions providing financial services to the poor. If you look at the history of some of the institutions which had failed, for example, taking example from Nicaragua's Banex, one of the main reasons was that it became investors' darling, and they chased Banex and overinvested and pressurized Banex to grow. So there is good money and bad money. And I think that is one aspect that we have to bear in mind. And that has not been highlighted enough in many discussions. The other one is the independent directors. That is what I call independent directors. Independent directors. They are not really independent. To my right is David, Peter Coy. He was whispering to me about a US study about independent directors and said that one study found that 50% of independent directors are golf buddies of the CEOs of these companies or chairmen. So that is how independent they are. So that is one of the issues. Issue here is how to get good independent directors, what kind of incentive structure and regulatory mechanism that needs to be put in place to ensure their true independence. The other comment that I want to make is that you also mentioned that, I think Nimal also mentioned about the member ownership in the institutions. The Professor Yunus always boasts about the member ownership, poor women owning Grameen Bank. I don't know to what extent they are really contributing to the governance of these institutions. I get very nervous when people say my institution is owned by 90% is owned by the members, clients, and these poor people. I become very nervous. And I have same concerns about ESOPs also when it exceeds a certain limit.
Sir, now that you've asked 3 questions, can we get a bit of focus from the panel and get them to address it?
Thank you.
Greg, would you like to take any of those?
Well, I mean, I think certainly investors have played their part in rapid growth, in some ways either encouraging or by the fact of making money available, encourage rates of growth that might have led to the 3 problems that we mentioned. But again, it takes more. I mean, somebody has to take that money. I mean, there's a management team there. They have to accept that money. The team at Banex could have said no. The other directors on the board, the other investors could have said, wait, it's too fast. We're not ready for that now. Come back next year. And so I think there's a whole range of people who are, and individuals and institutions that are responsible for this. And so I think it's too easy to simply point only at the investor community. The investor community is looking for deals. Organizations are trying to sell themselves. I think there are many players in the market. So I've addressed that question. I don't know about.
Okay, I would just like to add to that. From the own organization I represent, I fully endorse what Greg says. Yes, there is an investor community out there, and they do. It's a question of supply and demand. But I think boards and also management committees have a responsibility to take a call on what they want to take and over what time frame. For example, when we are one of the very few commercial banks who have a commitment to this model, but we take a very clear decision on the type of investor and the time horizon of that investor when we invite them, especially when it comes to placements. And unless there is a match and a common ground in terms of time horizons, we stay clear, because it would not be in the interest of the purpose we need to serve. That's just point one. And I think the second issue is, before I ask Greg to comment on the issue of independence, yes, you could have rules, you could have frameworks, but I think what one has to always challenge is independence truly comes in the mind. To what extent is one able to exercise that judgment and say, this is my perspective, my set of values and my integrity. Do I stand for? Is this relating to what I stand for? And exercise a true independence. And I'm not sure, maybe the panel can comment to what extent a set of framework can actually ring fence an independence of the mind. Alok, would you like to comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, can I make
Yes.
a small comment on this?
To stand by.
Yeah, I think if I talk in the context of Sri Lankan situation, I think the corporate governance directions issued by the central bank had been very effective during the recent past. As far as the MFIs are concerned, now Mr. Nimal Fernando mentioned about the ownership having large number of people. Now, in the case of my own bank, although our ownership goes to grassroots level people, our bank is regulated by central bank. So we are subject to central bank supervision, etc. But the recent directions on the proposed Microfinance Act and the mandatory listing is good, but in my view, the over-regulating is also not good, because in a bank like ours, we are a cooperative bank. Now, if the mandatory listing is taken place, I'm afraid that the ownership of the cooperative principles will be diminished, or rather, it can change hands, and the whole purpose or the original objectives will not be able to fulfill. A word about the independent directors. I think it's always good to have independent directors, but in my view, they should be in different fields, the professionals, like accounting field, the legal field, or technology, so you can strike a balance and then you can have real independent directors. Thanks.
Can we move on to another related topic? I think from the table we have been all so far focusing on the organization, the MFI itself, and its expectations on the subject of governance. But can we look at it from the perspective of an investor, the investor community, and get any comments from the audience here, from anybody who represents investors in this field, as to how important does the investor perceive governance when he or she invests in an MFI? Can we get some comments? Yes, Mr. Ratwat.
Can I ask something about overborrowing, if you don't mind? How do you diagnose that? What are the symptoms? You know, now in our kind of community where you find huge government programs, technically every person who is below the poverty line is entitled to, and is often at these loan melas, given these things. Then there are money lenders. There are various tiers of people who are supposed to hand out money, lend money to that category. But still, the small NGO MFIs carry on business, and it is access to credit. It's not credit. It's not the interest rate. So, but then, in theory, that one borrower may have taken from the cooperative bank, may have taken from Samurdhi, may have taken from Gamandiria, and goes to the MFI. And he knows that some of those, the loan mela ones, he needn't pay back, in fact. I mean, that's a practical situation, especially when elections are on the go. So how do you say that in that community there is overborrowing? Is there a criteria? Has CGAP got something on that? Because it's very easy to make a grand statement. Thank you.
Greg, would you respond?
Well, I think you're pointing to the problem, which is that we don't know. And so none of us know. I know that I might have 2 loans to a single individual, but have they fully disclosed to me how many other loans that they have at this point in time? So, I mean, I think that's part of the idea behind some credit information sharing, which would be to reduce the information asymmetry. I mean, it's I think you're pointing to the very problem. As MFIs, in a more competitive environment, we just don't know as much as we used to when we were the only lender in that town or that area. So it changes the market.
So it's not rocket science to find out
I guess that